Episode 44 this week. We are continuing our conversation about Dennis Van der Meer. Future soon-to-be Hall of Famer, coach, legend, South African.
A few notes from last week.
Yeah, talk to me.
With mistakes.
Never.
We have 8 pillars. I said 2 of 8 pillars, so I said, yeah.
No. So your mistakes.
I make lots of mistakes. In fact, I want you to start helping me. Keep me on path because we feel like we have a path to share.
Yeah, we do.
2 of 8 pillars would be 25%, but I said 2 of 4.
Just use a little simple multiplication.
Friend of ours,
you got 8.
Friend of ours from the Great White North, Danny Cooper. He said, you asked me,
Daniel,
if Dennis Van der Meer came to our program for 7 days. I said, no, he came for a week.
Yeah.
All right.
No. He was here for a week.
South African discipline we talked about. It reminds me of 50 years ago when I was in a boarding school, coat and tie, conversation with a professor and spouse, which fork to use.
Outside in?
Some of those buttons are not being pushed anymore. When asked what I do, what I say often
is,
instead of saying I'm a tennis teacher, tennis educator, I have this response: I fight ignorance every day.
Yeah, I've adopted that several times. I like it.
I think that Dennis Van der Meer fought ignorance every day. He did it most days with a smile on his face. Dennis, there's so many things we got to go through here. He told me once that he always wanted to employ the best player on the island. Ivan Goolagong lived on Hilton Head Island. Stan Smith still does.
Yeah.
So I'm not referring to the past champions, but John Hill for the longest time. But it's very true that many times in a small town, small city, the best player is looked upon as the most knowledgeable, the expert.
Yeah, I mean, that still continues today in all aspects of it, right?
Yeah, you just have to look at television commentators, the way they're selected. Another example for fighting ignorance, being so convincing, taking on all doubters, changing the grips on volleys. Now, Dennis would say, once a kid can hit a spin serve, then there could be the option to serve the continental. But he would talk about how you have to tweak the elbow and the wrist if someone had a continental grip, and even how he used to show what players would do with their forearm.
Yeah, he would they use the extensor muscle to change things. Which is true. I mean, if you have the strength to make those adjustments with the wrist or your forearm, but fundamentally.
So you have a kid in the ready position, racket set, neutral position, and they turn and they don't change the grip. And the next time they turn and they change the grip, Dennis would say, what takes more time? And of course, they take the same amount of time.
Right.
You just have to train yourself to do that.
Exactly.
These are just some notes from in between last week's episode and this, but we'll come back to instant tennis. Why and how Dennis got tennis players to play doubles so fast. First he teach the serve, then he would teach the volley. Turn, racket back and down. That was something that was a step in the PTR test. But Dennis, 100% taught a loop, but he just made it so simple. Okay, now we can serve. You can block the return.
Yeah.
Then you counter speed with speed. And then you just get underneath and you just go. Everybody goes. You do it where even the returner has to come in. Mike Carter, we'll talk a little bit about him later. Somebody we trained to teach tennis. He was with us for 5 years. I remember one time him saying, it's amazing. There's 3-5 players, and it looks like they're playing advanced doubles with Dennis. Dennis worked with Jeff Borowiak. You look him up, an American tennis player, highly accomplished musician. Dennis's advice, remember him talking about Dennis Borowiak, always be an original. I tell kids this all the time. Don't be a copycat. And that's really so important now with YouTube clips. Jeff was certainly his own person, which everyone should strive to be. He was once playing a match at the US Open and he decided right in the middle he wanted to keep his headset on and listen to music. But from that, for our listeners, don't have the off factor. Dennis was not big on kids running around getting autographs. If you're in awe of someone, you're stuck on their awesomeness, and then you won't be able to do it. They'll be able to do what they can do.
There are 1 or 2 exceptions, right? I mean, I remember all the years I spent at Indian Wells in that tournament with Vic and running the video projects. But for the longest time, the media could commingle with the players. If you weren't a coach there, if you were just part of the media, you'd all be in the same cafeteria. And I used to watch all these players would go up and get their picture taken with Roger. If they were, I remember like Max Mirny, and he had his little baby, and he's like goes up to Roger and gets his picture taken with Roger and his baby. I think there's one or two exceptions.
There's great stories though, like Sharapova. Hingis was older. She was training at IMG, training at Nick Baltieri's place, and all these kids are asking for autographs, and Sharapova didn't ask for an autograph. She just asked, how many more years are you going to play? And Hingis kind of stops, said, why do you ask? He goes, because I want to play you.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Dennis holding an audience. Dennis, not knowing him as a child, he had to be having some fun. He was a prankster, a trickster. I remember Dennis having one of his assistants intentionally interrupting his lecture. Dennis assigned him to do this. Tell him, Billie Jean King's on the phone, Dennis.
Yeah.
The message was, Billie Jean's on the phone and would like to speak to you right away for just a few minutes. And Dennis would reply, tell her I'll be back. I'll call her back at lunchtime. Right now, I'm with these fine people. Yeah. Some would say that's a BS tactic. Sure, a little bit, but Dennis, he was close to Billie. So many people they name drop all the time. They don't really even know people. But so he was close to Billie.
But every person in the room was like feeling special that day.
Right. So he went to the nth degree to really captivate his students. And that just, everybody switched on, and then learning's increased.
Yeah.
In the medical world, experience is not measured in years. You talk to physicians, experience is measured in case studies. Dennis certainly had the years for sure. He taught a lifetime of tennis. But perhaps he had the largest volume of case studies, all the people that he'd met and taught with.
Did Dennis hold on to video? Do you know that, if he kept a library of past students or?
I would say not the way we do. That's the influence from Braid and documenting development, but
documenting everything.
No, for sure. Just I would say somewhat, but you have to always think. Even like for myself, I'm basically 20 years younger, and when I started, I think, like say I have 3 older brothers. They wouldn't have seen video of themselves skating where I did. I can remember when I first started coaching, it was reel to reel.
Yeah.
VHS was this for a long time.
Yeah.
Football coaches, the sequence analyzer.
Yeah.
It's like the book we have by Mottram. It's 104 pages, and it's like the old penny arcade, and you just flip it, and
those are cool.
Charlie Passerelle's backhand, Goulard's backhand, Newcomb's serve.
Yeah.
And you can go 1,000, 2,000.
Yeah.
One thing with Dennis, he was an on-court and a classroom guy. I think so many people, they climb the ladder, and next thing you know is they're just carrying a briefcase.
Right.
I like the ball hopper side of it, where you don't get removed from the game.
You get out of the trenches.
So he was not a consultation pro. He was a clinic pro. So many times there's a roundtable discussion, there's a meeting, and it's like, let's get out on the court and go to work.
Yeah.
So many things. Dennis's sound system at Hilton Head, he was a techie in his own way. Each court was wired with an amplifier. So he could be in his office. He had a really small office. You look out the window, look like 10 courts down.
Yeah.
He pushed a button that was attached to a gadget, and the attachment was to attach to his pocket.
Yeah.
And he just would push a button and say, Tom, you're mucking up. I told you what to do on your backswing. And the players would just kind of look up like this.
They're like, God?
Really. They would just, as soon as you look around, like, where's Dennis?
Yeah.
But no, it's true. The expression for, the eyes in the back of your head, someone who's just, taught so much tennis, knowing without knowing, being able to read people so quickly. This is in my notes that we didn't finish from last week. Dennis Van der Meer says this all the time. Let me show you a little trick.
Yeah.
Something he did on a daily basis.
Let me show you a trick.
The little trick was basically a corrective measure. It's a way to improve stroke production at a faster rate. It's in a very clever way. We used to say the corrective measure just forces you to do it, where you don't have to think about it. for us, I think with our podcast, it really, someone like say Dennis is to go back and even have a podcast on corrective measures. You could do it stroke by stroke.
Right.
And I think that's a much better format than, a magazine format where you're interviewing people. We want to interview people. We want to interview people that will, carry the torch from tennis teaching from the past. I think that, say with Dennis, I think of Welby Van Horn, same thing, is that Welby knew, on the forehand side, I should have done this. He kept tweaking. Even when he was in his the extended care, the nursing home. Dennis would be able to teach and say, okay, we're make strokes grow. You teach a backhand volley, and from there, just logical, sequential order. Now we're gonna teach a one-handed underspin backhand, a slice. One of my favorite building blocks from Dennis Van der Meer, I think if people take the time to listen to our podcast, this in itself, in relationship of strokes, in relationship of spins.
Yeah, exactly.
At the ready position, you turn, you have the volley. At the ready position, turn, the volley, you turn a little further, it turns into the forehand. So it's not so complicated. Just a genius in making things simplified.
And we use the term system a lot, but I think it's just better put an organized plan or a pathway, like you said at the beginning of this podcast.
Yeah, systematic.
You say that word, and we talk about this often. People kind of system, but you say, hey, it's an organized plan. It's a pathway, proven pathway.
For us, a system is putting a grip sticker on a racket. For us, is how do you position the kid in the viewfinder? I mean, it's okay. It's all, it's plans.
Yeah.
Plan to do it right. Plan to do it right. Plan to do it better.
Yeah.
Instant tennis, placing one ball on the tennis court. I think we talked about that. 2 players facing off, field hockey, ice hockey. And then from that, they're just rallying boop-de-boop, as he would say. Just touch the ball, tap it.
Boop. Yeah.
Another Van der Meer, tap, tap. In fact, we used to tease Craig Toddy was with us for a long time. One of his nicknames was tap, tap.
That's what I was just going to say. It reminded me of tap, tap.
But then, he was, again, trickery is if, put 2 balls on a tennis court, and now you're trying to aim for the tennis ball, and the net's a barrier, but Dennis would pull it off where they wouldn't even know the net was there. Of course, tennis was so big in the 70s that Dennis would have he would call it Japanese tape. And it was like you see the tape that they have at a crime scene. Yeah. And divide the court east and west. Your wife showed me a photo yesterday from our library, and she said, I really like this. It's a little girl, and she's like 5 years old with her back to the camera, in the ready position. Yeah. And I said, look at the flyers in the middle of the court. The girls facing east and west, because there were so many kids would come out to tennis. Yeah. That's another whole topic we need to come back to. We need to make tennis more user friendly, less costly. Mm-hmm. So Dennis would increase the distance. The next thing you know, it evolves into mini tennis. Mass teaching. So Dennis could be, as I said, 14,000 square feet, 14,000 plus 2 tennis courts. Next thing you know, he's got all these people rallying. Yeah. Dennis Van der Meer, I had the dubious pleasure. He taught the best tennis players and the worst tennis players in the world. I had the dubious pleasure. Dubious? I think of someone like Margaret Court, Manuel Santana, from Wimbledon champs to weekend hacks. Back in the day, some people loved it, some people hated it. With the late Bud Collins, he would come into everyone's living room and he would say, "We hackers." Yeah. What are you talking about? I'm not a hacker. Here's a story for you. Jack Winters was a writer for Sports Illustrated, and Al Parker, what a great tennis player. Mm-hmm. One of the best junior tennis players ever. He had a very good career in college. He played pro tennis. As I said, Dennis liked gadgets. So, and again, Parker, one of the best juniors in American history. So I'm wearing an earpiece. Dennis is wearing an earpiece. The players are wearing earpieces. And I'm coaching Jack Winters, a writer from Sports Illustrated. Yeah. And of course, Al Parker won 6-0, 6-0. Dennis used to have so much fun. It was just like, he enjoyed telling me that he totally outcoached me. He had great sense of humor. I think the late Don Rickles. I think Dennis perhaps changed from that just a little bit towards the end, but
I see that.
They go PG-13. He could take the piss out of you. The writer was just shocked at how well a 12-year-old could play tennis. Back to corrective measures. So clever. Let me show you a trick. Corrective measures finding a way to make people hit the ball quickly, quick fix. I mean, Braden had a book called Quick Fix. The example would be like too big a swing on the forehand. Dennis would use the net. They have to drape the racket over the net. I mean, a tiny tot's not going to do that, but so you just toss the player, and every time they hit the net, he would do it against the fence.
Yeah.
Put the racket right in your belly button, and then make 3 circles. Feed you the ball, 3 circles, 1, 2, 3. So the racket didn't go way behind you; it was right to the side of your body. Then 2 circles, then 1 circle. So you just recreate the feeling. And there's, so you had so many ways to, attack a problem, so many ways to fix it.
Yeah. So important. I was just going to say, because so many people, I mean, and I've definitely been guilty of this in the past as well, with all the, as you would say, doctoral jargon and, fancy words or whatever to describe something when you're teaching somebody, but it's the simple tricks like this, things you can do to actually make the changes. The application is what's so important.
An arsenal tricks, big bag of tricks. With that, again, people would be critical of the standard method, but Dennis would say, learn one way.
Yeah.
And the thing is that he would be criticized for teaching one way, and it was like just the opposite. We get that as well. Mm-hmm. Oh, you teach everyone the same. No, we shoot some film.
Teach fundamentals.
We shoot some film and say, okay, these are your problems. This is what we have to address.
Yeah.
Again, someone takes the racket straight back instead of making that.
Well, I was just going to say, let me say this. All the years I worked in the Big Braden Tennis College, and you get a whole new group of players coming in every 3 days. And we'd videotape, forehand, backhand, serve, volley, and you see the same mistakes. People make the same mistakes. That's the thing is, you see the same stuff over and over again. It's not like someone comes in and you go, wow, I've never seen that before. I mean, it's just like, you didn't get below the ball. You're coming across too fast
right. It's like if you talk to an English teacher or math teacher, I've never seen that problem before.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing is like there's so many common errors and mistakes. So there's a lot of the same fixes.
So a player back in the day, it was straight back versus a loop. So someone would come straight back, and Dennis would say, okay, let me teach you the drop shot. And then you say, okay, just do that for disguise, add to your game instead of making a dissertation on how they were taught the wrong way.
Yeah.
With juniors, remember Dennis telling me one time, Stephen, I taught tennis so much better years ago, but
Stephen,
I think that, he knew he was making an impact teaching tennis teachers. And, certainly traveled all over the world there definitely is a problem with loyalty, people bopping and shopping. You help a kid, you take them from point A to point B. And I mean, I've helped many hardship case kids, where they've ended up being ranked 1 in their age group, say in the 14s. I mean, I could name a half a dozen.
Yeah.
And, and then they need to move on.
Yeah.
Dennis knew how to perfectly orchestrate a powerful learning experience. One of my juniors one time is a blaster. So Dennis, he just organized it, gets everybody on the bleachers, and we're talking a couple hundred people. And so he creates his own center court, amphitheater. And so now he has one of his assistants at the net post keeping score. Dennis feeds the ball. He puts the ball basket in front of him for safety, feeds the ball, drops the racket, puts his hand over his head, feeds the ball to the corner, and his assistant, the kids on the other side, the assistant's going, love 15. So Dennis wins, and he's feeding the ball to the corner. He's a tournament player.
Yeah.
And Dennis just goes, you could not beat a blind person without a racket. Because people they just don't keep enough balls in play.
Yeah.
I remember one time, a simple concept, we had this film that Dennis didn't have, and boy, he was so excited to get it. It was a film on Borg's footwork. And one of our students was teaching tennis in Europe, brought it to us, and I remember Dennis just saying, okay, and he ran an entire clinic on that, just the split step, And then, okay, now we're going to do this off the split step, the forecourt, the middle of the court, all over the court.
Yeah.
And, you know, we do know now that, you know, okay, sometimes when people split, it's just 1 foot. And, you know, if they're veering off on the letter V to the forehand volley, it's just their right foot facing that direction.
Yeah, anticipating.
Going fast. A classic story. I know this kid. Kid was a problem. He goes to Dennis's summer camp. Kid was bad-mouthing our program. This is when we were Tyler, Texas. So Dennis, of course, one of our students was coaching for Dennis. So it was like a 24-year-old playing a 17-year-old. So, you know, Dennis just had that sixth sense the kid was bad-mouthing our program. And Dennis was so much part of our program. He's so much. Got the program off the ground. So he has this is his classic. I remember I was working with Andy Brandy one time. He did the same thing. Smith, you're going to play this guy. That's another story for another time. And Smith, if you don't win 6-0, 6-0, you're fired. So Andy's like 24. I'm like 22. So when I meet some of Andy's former players, I go, hey, I was coached by Andy. I'll tell you a story. So
back to the lecture.
Dennis tells this coach that we trained, beat this kid 0-0.
Yeah.
So then Dennis talks to him. It doesn't help out. Dennis calls the father. The kid picks up the phone, and
the kid he did beat him 6-0, 6-0.
Yeah. So then Dennis eventually talks. He talks to the kid. It doesn't work, and the kid's just a problem at the camp. And so Dennis calls up his father. And so you can just imagine Dennis. Hi, this is Dennis Van der Meer. And then he asked the father, he goes, let me ask you a question. Are you a jerk? Of course, he used a little better word than jerk.
Yeah.
And he goes, well, I just think you'd be a jerk because your kid's a jerk. And then so he says, what do you think we can do to stop him from being a jerk? And then the guy's, well. And he goes, well, I think it's too big of a problem. You're going to have to pick him up at the airport. You'll be there in 2 hours. We've already sent him home.
Yeah.
Over the years, again, people were to criticize Dennis, and they would say, he was all about the money, and I just think nonsense. I mean, with his mind, drive, ingenuity, he could have made much more money in another business. I remember his brother telling me this. I had a chance to spend time with his brother just because I was in the Savannah airport, and so I just knew it was Van der Meer's brother. Just go, you've got to be Dennis's older brother.
Dennis did have a Ferrari, though, right?
Yeah, it's in my notes here.
Okay.
Yeah, he didn't always follow the advice. He would tell coaches, "Don't have an expensive car."
But that's because in those days it was Magnum PI, right? Even though Dennis didn't have the mustache, but
the
Magnum PI was
the red Ferrari.
The Ferrari,
Dennis used to tell people. I remember a guy by the name of Ed Foster telling me this years ago. He said, if you have a really nice car, then your members will think, yeah, you're doing really well, and they won't take as many lessons. Anyway, Dennis. So I run this program over 100 students, and we have 9 students. They're going by the first name Dave or David. This is just how Dennis flew. So he gets everybody on the bleachers again, and he goes, all the Davids, if you come out and stand on the center service line. And then he does it twice. He's a good comedian. He pauses, drama, holds the punchline. What's your name? Dave. What's your name? David. What's your name? Dave.
Yeah.
He goes through. He goes, let's do it one more time. And then he goes, I just want to tell you that you have boring parents. Sit down.
And that was it.
Yeah. Here's another story. Dennis's clinics. So I work with a girl by the name of Laura Hanna. She was a very good tennis player. She ended up playing at Texas A&M. Spent several years coaching her when she was in juniors and then in college. So she's in town, and Van der Meer's coming out, and I go, Laura, come here. He's going to pick you up. He's going to watch everybody hit balls, and there's going to be a point where he has everybody, the stage is set, everybody's watching, and he's going to bring you out on the court. Mm-hmm. And Dennis could, hold on to 20 tennis balls in one hand, whatever, just impressive. But so he was a master of all these trick shots where he'd serve underhand. So I remember saying, Laura,
side spin.
Yeah, I said, he's going to call you up. When he calls you up, he's going to say, we'll play a little game. And he's going to say, I win. So I said, when he does that, you go right up to the service line. You move in as close as possible. And if his racket's going right, you're going left.
Yeah.
If his racket's going left, you're going right. So I'd coached her beforehand. So, I mean, he used to just bring really good players out. He'd be like, we'll just play to 4.
Yeah.
You turn to the audience, I beat her, held my serve at love. Yeah. And so anyway, she gets the returns back. And then, Dennis just looks at me and he just goes, Stephen, you SOB. You SOB, you told her my secret. This is something else. The alpha dog. This has helped me out so much.
We're keeping the lyrics clean.
Yeah,
on this podcast, just so you know, listeners. I mean, maybe someday down the road, we'll, I don't know, have a little more flavor. But
yeah, we can.
Not for now.
I mean, I know a few people that can't say one sentence without the F word. It's in every sentence.
Yeah,
there's a couple of those people we need to interview. The alpha dog.
Yeah,
you're in a clinic setting, camp. Dennis could just pick out the alpha dog, and the person who's going to control the juniors, the bully. They're cocky.
Yeah,
you got to break that person down one way or the other. Build them as a team player. One of the best ways to do that is say, okay, you're the best player. Let's have a skills test. You can't hit the broadside of a barn.
Yeah.
Shut up and put up. He's the best player. That's how you do the UTR now. Okay, raise your hand. Who's got the highest UTR?
Yeah.
And you bring out someone who's a 10.5 and say, okay, we do the tiebreaker test. And if you feed like Lansdorp or Hopman, and it's like 0707. Okay, I think you're in the right place.
Yeah.
I think you're in the right place.
Still a little to work on.
Create a culture where everyone can practice with everyone. That's a sidebar to the alpha dog. What Dennis used to say about Tom Stowe and the Berkeley Tennis Club, that was a tennis club that created the paperwork for him to be able to come to the U.S., where the members would practice with each other. I think it's wrong. I understand there's always two sides to the story, a plus and a minus, but if you go to a controlled public park, a manned public park, it's got someone at the front desk, they're not just unmanned courts, or a tennis club, and say, well, no, you can only have 3 balls on the court. I mean, I really think, come on, your kid is taking lessons. I mean, you're taking lessons to adult beginners. You should be able to get a ball hopper and go out and toss balls to each other. That comes back to what Lair wrote about Dennis's missionary zeal for practice.
Yeah.
So that's where I think all tennis players should own their own baskets. I think that every college tennis player, when they show up, they should have a ball hopper in the room. And when I say things like that, it comes back to, having been around someone like Dennis Van der Meer. It doesn't, it can be a laundry basket. It can be they have these shoulder bags now.
Yeah.
So again, coming back to his brother, the older version of Dennis, instantly knew as his brother. The brother spoke so highly of Dennis, just talked about his drive and his energy level. I think it's always great to, meet a sibling and say, okay, tell me about Dennis in the beginning. Here's another quick story. Mike Carter, mentioned him earlier, he was with us for 5 years. 2 as a student, 3 as a student assistant or staff. He really wanted to work for the Texas Tennis Association, which he has now. He's been there, I think, 25 plus years. But I remember first interview, he was in the final 3, didn't get hired. Second time, didn't get hired. So, one time I said, okay, we'll send you here. And it was, the first time, I can't remember, it was Van der Meer first and Braden, but it's like, well, you didn't get the job. And I said, I'll tell you what, we'll set it up where you go work for Van der Meer. And the second time, set you up where you work for Braden, or vice versa.
Over a summer, right? Or something like that.
Yeah. Well, the German situation, I think that was a little bit longer. But
the Germans.
So I called Dennis up, and Dennis is all set for the summer. But I said, no, you gotta do me this favor, and you gotta hire this young guy Carter, which he'd already met. Carter had already been certified because Dennis had made all those trips out to Tyler, Texas. Yeah. So Carter, anybody knows Carter, I think we should have a podcast just where I tell Carter stories.
Heard he was a pretty ugly gentleman.
The good-looking, fun-loving Carter. Thinking of Doug Tomlin, he told me something about it. Say to Carter about because he's a drummer. Oh, yeah, I think it goes like this: drummers like to hang around musicians, which means they're not musicians. I think I have it right.
Unfortunately, drummers always end up something tragic happens to drummers in bands quite often. Got to watch Spinal Tap out there, listeners.
So I used to always interview the punchline. I get ahead of myself, but I used to introduce. This is Mike Carter. he used to have one of the most important jobs in tennis. He used to walk Dennis Van der Meer's dog. So Carter loves dogs. He meets Van der Meer's dog. Van der Meer tells me a story. And, Carter sees the dog. Next thing you know, he's wrestling with the dog. I think it was Heike. So Carter's wrestling with Van der Meer's dog. And next thing you know, as Dennis goes, Mike, my dog likes you. You're going to walk him twice a day.
Yeah, exactly. For free.
No, use that salary. So with... But it didn't matter. Dennis's group dynamics, he could run it by himself. He really, a lot of ways, he could pull it off with the pros. Yeah. That's something else I worked, from working with Dennis Van der Meer. I remember one year, Matt Clore he was at Florida State, then he was a coach, then he was at NC State, and he was working at this beautiful place, Cary Park.
Yeah,
and the coaches weren't listening to him like they should have. So I show up, and we have it all organized with group dynamics, Dennis Van der Meer style, and I have all the coaches in the corner, and they really, some of them, they didn't want to be paid there because in a situation like that, I come in, I'm running a workshop, and they're being paid a promotional rate instead of their private rate. They're making less money per hour.
Right.
Or he comes in and he definitely knows a better way, and he's showing them some things, and they weren't listening. I mean. The guy can flat out play, he can flat out teach. And so fighting leaders every day. And I said, this clinic is working without you. And I said, if it goes the way we'd like it to, and you don't pay attention, these students will know more than you. Yeah. And that just comes from, being around Dennis Van der Meer. Right. And I think it's a matter of not, I observed Dennis Van der Meer. I studied Dennis Van der Meer. People have to keep in mind, we practiced Dennis Van der Meer. We had a 15-hour lab. Yeah. And it was over the course of a decade, basically.
Yeah. Yeah. You put it into practice.
So if you see Mike Carter, say Heike, go watch, walk my dog. Yeah. Targets. This is a great Van der Meer. So again, so clever. You get one feeder, one hitter, and one spotter. And the spotter just hangs onto 10 tennis balls. Mm-hmm. I mean, it could be 5, but you feed, hit a cross-court forehand to this cone, and the spotter just puts down. Yeah. It should be like in a candy bar, a cluster of peanuts, and they should all be pretty close to the cone.
Here's where it landed.
And it's awful.
Yeah.
It's awful. So, again, that's where you do have to be persuasive. Like, okay, I'm going to listen to this guy. All right, I'm going to listen to this gal. Yeah. People don't even come close. They don't even come close to the target. In tennis, bless you, Gesundheit. The ball has to be in.
It happens.
Dennis used to always hit balls. He could put a ball on a dime. So he, not that often, but again, when he'd say, okay, let me show you how to do it. Feed me the ball. And then it's just so close. Yeah. But that's where Dennis would go through. He'd make the list of here are the 5 things you're trying to achieve when you're hitting a tennis ball, and power would be the last one. Yeah, right. Placement, precision, spin. Yep. On backboards, Dennis loved backboards. He had one at his house. It's such a great way to hit balls. So Dennis was a showman, and the showman has to show, and Dennis could definitely show how to hit tennis balls. Yeah. Lunchtime hits, he'd have his Granny Smith apple. He'd hit for an hour. Hit with him numerous times. As he got older, the rules would change. But you have to hit in this area. I remember hitting with him on clay, and okay, you hit in this area, going back and forth, and as he got older, if he didn't have to move, and that's like I think of Tony Roach, guys like that. Elder statesman. He's you could just stand in the corner and hit with Fed. It's just the movement's not there. Yeah. Van der Meer on toughness. One time I took him to the doctor. He had a bone spur in his foot. He gets a cortisone shot. He's hobbling and limping when we're walking from the car to the doctor's office, but no one would have known. He's on court all day. No one would have known that the guy was in pain. Yeah. So the doctor tells him to stay
toughness.
Doctor tells him to stay off his foot. We get in the car, and Dennis is very polite to the doctor. We get in the car, and he says, Stephen, I'm going to be leaving on Monday morning. Please take these crutches back. So the next day, I mean, you just know the guy's in pain.
Yeah.
And just tough. And I think that's one thing, kids are still kids, but the times have changed and the pain tolerance, we're not producing, tennis players like we used to.
Well, what are some of the ways that you think, what are some simple ways, like things to do with young players to help them with that?
Oh, I mean, we could have a podcast on that. Make them pack their own lunch. Make them get part-time jobs.
Are you listening, parents?
With, it's amazing to me. Yeah, they have their homework. It's very costly for a tournament player to string rackets. And, the next thing you know is that they bought a stringer, but the kid doesn't string rackets. The father stays up or the mother stays up and strings rackets. I think just common sense.
Yeah, we go back to say, our goal is to try to make them be their own coach, to be an independent thinker. So any way that you can help your player, your son, your daughter, be an independent thinker, problem solver. Do some things.
Families are smaller. Families are smaller, and it's just simple math. People get too much attention. With anything and everything for Dennis was a teaching aid, like a paper cup. He would have people hang into a paper cup, turn it like this.
Yeah.
And it's just amazing. You would pick out the person who's the newest player, and they would come up and just hand precision. They could, they just make the ball go right in the cup.
We'll make a video of that.
With Dennis was not a big fan of private lessons. He could teach so fast. Repeating that from last week, if you got off the notes, is that babies teach for 5 minutes and then for the next 55 minutes. Many times people have to realize the cash register is what runs the private lesson. People aren't going to drive to the tennis facility for a 5-minute lesson. Yeah. I'd rather give a kid 5 12-minute lessons. But this is something because of Van der Meer's skill level, not only how he could teach tennis, but how he could teach other people to teach tennis. That would not happen with Dennis Van der Meer training. That what you hear, it's very common in the industry. Well, if you want instruction, you have to take privates. In the clinics, they drill and they play. But if you really want some attention on your son's forehand, daughter's backhand, whatever. Yeah. The match simulated drills. I did this for a long time. Dennis had a program. His longtime assistant, Louis Cap, nuclear physicist, Czech. I did this at one point, and I've recommended it to many people I've trained. So it's Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, I do match simulated drills. Mm-hmm. Monday, Wednesday, Friday, come out and we'll do the boring stuff.
Fundamental work.
We'll slow down and, Dennis wrote donkey work, do the hard yards. And so I did that for several years at one place, and the hands down, the people that came to work on technique, they became much better players.
Right.
But, a lot of times people just don't want to work on strokes. But so I think that Dennis, definitely, he was one who combined, because, he ran a big operation, all-encompassing program, ran service programs.
Right.
Like, that's more match simulated drills. Yeah, you could teach tactics and teach so many of the insights. But the education base, okay, we're going to just slow you down and hit balls. Dennis used to call kids sometimes little buggers. The little buggers just want to have fun. Yeah. But coming back to old school, coming back to, I think, sitting at myself at that table in prep school, like, whoa, this is pretty slow, having a conversation with a professor and their spouse. And
so it's a real challenge, especially these days when everything's, you have it at your fingertips. The answer is right there. There's no more, hey, okay, let me go to the library and look it up in Encyclopedia Britannica. You just punch a few things with your thumb and you have it. That's the mentality as far as just, okay, you want some popcorn, you get it in 1 minute. You want your forehand, you get it in 1 minute.
I communicated a little bit with Mark Spann, somebody trained to teach tennis a long time ago. He's co-owner of a club in the Philadelphia area, and his mother won a Wimbledon doubles title, and we talked about him, just now I asked him about a podcast, just, 10 things he learned from his mother. And, one, he said, she's South African. Later never comes.
Yeah.
Later never comes. So it's, slow it down, do it right in the beginning. John Wooden, when are you going to have time to do it again?
Yeah.
Sweeper, our beautiful college in Virginia. It's just up the road from Dennis's headquarters in South Carolina. He met with the college officials. He negotiated building 6 more courts. Smart guy. So, okay, I'll mortgage those courts, and then I'll come here and I'll run a camp.
Yeah.
Used to fly into Lynchburg. And again, beautiful setting. So I'm not sure. I'd be the wrong person to say these are what the details were, but it was like, okay, here's a 30-year lease. So come in, I'll build the tennis courts. So he had dorms, he had a cafeteria, he had other amenities. So besides Hilton Head, he had a successful boarding camp.
And that was mainly for junior players, correct?
No.
Adults coming in and boarding as well?
Yeah, it's mostly juniors for sure. Mostly juniors. I would say I'd have to stop and think, but Jim Verdick every summer, Jim Lair. I remember going there and really enjoying it. So I would go for Jim Verdick's team coaching or Jim Lair's mental toughness. So there would be adults there. I remember one time I took Dan Toney, Tyler, Texas, physician, big friend of the program, just loved tennis. So he went.
Dan Toney,
he goes.
2 first names?
So Dan Toney goes, his wife Linda wants to go. And I said, well, yeah, she's more than welcome to come, but just let her know when you check in, they give you a pillow, some sheets, and you're staying in a room that doesn't have air conditioning in the summertime. So it wasn't like going to Hilton Head. So yeah, I don't think that many adults went there.
Yeah, that'll help with toughness as well.
Working towards the end of this, Tom Gilly, of all our students, Tom definitely worked for Dennis the longest. His wife, Julie, she's a chief administrator. I'm not sure if she's like the assistant CEO. I mean, she's, maybe the glue. She has so much to do in helping Dan Santorum every day.
Julie. Yeah,
so Tom, his students studying Chinese history and also at the University of Chicago, which is like one of the toughest schools to get in the country. So he decides that he wants to study tennis. So he shifts. Julie, the speed reader, he'd borrow 4 or 5 books, read them over the weekend. Not your typical student in the tennis tech program when it came to reading comprehension, myself included. He'd be someone to interview over Dennis. And I think that's where just go deeper and say, okay, to me, there with like a Welby Van Horn, a Vic Braden, Dennis Van der Meer, Bill Jacobson, go on, Verdict.
Yeah.
It's like, let's have clinics. And this is how they did it.
Yeah.
And instead of everybody trying to reinvent the wheel, makes no sense for everybody to put in their 2 cents. That doesn't happen in other sports. People were looking for new twists and turns, but, football coaches, they used to take over an hour for people to explain what was it called? The GreatBase sweep or the power sweep, the Lombardi sweep.
You haven't heard of the next gen tackles yet? I guess you're not really up on your NFL right now. That's all right. I'll show you.
Well, there is a lot to be said about tackling because now they're trying to do it where they can bring more safety to the game.
A few years ago it was modern, but now it's actually next gen tackling.
Next gen, okay.
Yeah.
Information.
I'll show you.
Information, ideas, and insights just gathered. So I think Tom Gilly, one of his classmates, we'll mention that often because it needs to be mentioned, Dave Anderson, Back to the Future. So one of the best stories I've ever heard, Tom told me, I think everyone should know this about Dennis. I think Dennis definitely, he has critics because people are just, I think, envious, jealous. He accomplished so much. Sure. And, I think a lot of people that were critical, as I said in last week's podcast, have you ever watched him work?
Yeah.
There's no perfection, but come on, this guy is just, it's like, get out your notebook and start writing some things down. So he touched upon not having an expensive car. So This is really an insignificant part of the story. So Jilly finally gets to drive the red Ferrari. But what happened was Dennis's wife, Pat, she has a stroke and her life is in jeopardy, and she has, she's in a hospital in Savannah. So Dennis, he goes in the red Ferrari, but he calls up Jilly and says, "Tom, bring a van, fill it up with ball hoppers and targets." And so, because Dennis left work to spend all this time with Pat at the hospital. And, fortunately, she got through it, but it was nip and tuck. And so outside of, Pat's hospital room, there's 2 tennis courts. Again, we should have Jilly tell the story. I'm sure he'd tell it a lot better and be spot on. But so this is one of my students telling me the story. So there's times where Dennis can't be with Pat because there's no visitors allowed certain times. So what Dennis does, and nobody knows about it, he starts teaching tennis on those courts, and he packs those courts. Obviously, one, that, it's just good for the kids out there, whoever the adults coming out to hit some tennis balls, but to the point where, eventually Pat's going to be able to sit up and look out the window and watch Dennis teaching tennis.
Yeah.
Amazing. I've heard Jim Lair say that experience with Pat, Dennis was just an A++ guy, but that just took it to another higher level.
Yeah.
My notes here. That's a pretty moving story. I remember with certainly being therapeutic for Dennis, but and he was there and definitely canceled, his schedule and but I think he just thought that Pat would find strength knowing that Dennis was right outside the window teaching tennis.
Yeah.
So again, the experience, it changed Dennis for the better, took a little bit of the edge off. And I think that if people are trying to teach tennis, I think there's a lot of a go along to get along. People edify each other too much in the tennis industry. You're great, I'm great. But if you're fighting battles for tennis truth, there's definitely an edge to that.
Yeah.
And I think of Don Meyer, the basketball coach. Our listeners should look up Don Meyer. We have so much information on Don Meyer in our library. He was in a horrific car accident, almost lost his life from the car accident, but then when he's in the hospital, they find out he has cancer. Right. And he came back and, he passed away, but he came back long enough where he was back coaching college tennis in a wheelchair. Dennis, I know when my father died, we had just got done with this intense week of training and testing coaches. I tell this story often. Dennis, such a class act. He calls me up. And first, he expresses his condolences. And then he said, "Stephen, everybody dies. Get back to work and keep working for your father's name."
Yeah.
That's a very moving story for me. It's that, I think people grieve differently, but yes, it's, no one gets out of life.
Yeah.
This is how it ends. So try to make
gets out alive.
try to make the most of it. So, but I think that, Dennis understood tough love. You got to keep in mind, I've had many people who from Africa say, "Hey, this is life in Africa," and his parents being missionaries. It's not that he was being insensitive, but that's just life.
Yeah.
But I think that one of the reasons that he also moved away from juniors, maybe I should do the same thing. I'm a little bit of a dinosaur.
Your health?
I always tease people. I use a Vic Braden line. I used to be
bad for my health.
I used to be 6'3" and thin and 6'3" and full head of hair, and then I started coaching juniors. Seriously, I had people tell me at one point they thought I could.
Couldn't do it.
That I could be a comedian. Then I started teaching junior tennis. No sense of humor after that. But to keep a lid on the toughness, and I think now with society, it's very difficult to coach. I mean, I used to say, "Well, what percentage am I the coach?" And I think again, parents their intentions are all good, but are they really letting the coach? And Here's something about Braden and Van der Meer. They weren't really all that close. When there was times where they would be meeting and they'd see each other at a conference and such. But one lives. Most of Dennis's career was on the East Coast and Vic's is on the West Coast. But one of my brothers passed away, and I remember Vic would call me several times, and that was just Vic. But Vic called Dennis when he found out Pat, and I'm pretty sure I'm the one who told him the story. I told him the Tom Gilly story about Dennis's wife.
Yeah.
And Dennis opened up to Vic and said, he never knew that he needed someone so much with Pat. Mm-hmm. So humility. Again, I think that story. You just think of Dennis Van der Meer. He's got all this going on, and he teaches tennis outside this hospital in Savannah.
Yeah,
and because he was, people would be critical that he was over promoting, overselling. But he was fighting for tennis. Again, fighting ignorance is make tennis better. Let's wind down here. Fighting battles in the tennis world. We could just go through myths. There's so many.
Are there?
It's like
there's a few.
Let's do this. Fun exercise would be make a list. It's very similar to the paper clip.
Right.
You give everybody a paper clip, you give a piece of paper and a pen and say, okay, boom, you got 3 minutes. Write down. And, the kid who's got the highest GPA or the highest SAT score, they're not going to win that contest generally. Who's creative?
Creative, yeah.
So
you make a list of how many ways you could use it. How many practical ways.
We'll throw out these mind vitamins, if you schmooze, you lose. But, you got to have some people skills. You got to have some fun. If you can't schmooze a little bit, you're going to just get stuck. I tell that to some parents. I said, one reason tennis will be very good for your child is you don't want to have them end up in the back room in a cubicle.
Yeah.
They need to be able to shake hands and say good morning. And
I always joke around with a lot of the kids here. They're accomplished in school and taking all these AP classes or whatever. But I always joke around saying, that they're dumb, smart kids because the common sense isn't always there.
Yeah. So, you can't have street smarts if you're never in the streets.
Exactly.
If you have a full-time chauffeur.
Yeah.
And again, that's where kids are underprepared. They're overprotected. I understand why they're overprotected. It wasn't, like when I grew up, you get out of school, you make your own fun. And, my mom, the mom next door, they ring a bell and you knew it was time to come in. Kids today, they don't really even play outside. Tennis in that sense is just over-structured. Can you just go play?
Yeah.
Could you guys get together with a ball hopper and make it a productive hour?
Well, I think it has changed a lot. I remember my sister telling me, and she lives in this really nice area in Orange County, that there was a couple of kids playing in the park, and they were probably 12 or something. And it was kind of like, where are your parents? But I think someone actually called, I don't know if it was the police or they called somebody like, hey, there's these two kids playing alone in the park. So yeah, times have definitely changed, when if you're playing on your own by yourself or whatever, and someone's calling the police to see where your mom and dad are.
So back to the paper clip is with Dennis Van der Meer, okay, what can you do with the ball hopper? Just very quickly.
Yeah.
All these different things. So ball hopper, someone has a one-handed backhand, they have a two-handed backhand, you're teaching a one-handed slice, is if they're a righty, hang on to the hopper with their left hand, fill it halfway up with balls, so they're opening way up, so then they're not swinging the ball hopper, they're keeping the ball hopper down, and it just helps the body stay sideways.
How would that drill work today? How are you going to open up and pull across that ball?
Now you're supposed to open up.
You just can't do it.
Well, that's where the thing is, with so much film, like Roger Federer will hit, just like when people mistake the recovery as a follow through on the forehand, it's the same thing when someone's coming in and they're hitting underspin backhand. If they were to catch it at the hit, now the racket tracks out. And I know you're doing so much of that on Instagram, showing these short clips.
Well, but then also with that, since we're on that shot, we've talked about this before, but if they're warming up, a loose warm up, and they're hitting right at each other as well, the ball comes in close. And they hit a slice. They do hit a side spin shot. It's in close. It's not like it's match play where it's out away from them and they're going to the net, or you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So there is a lot of that too. Same with a volley where, the person's hitting right at them. Yeah. So they're going to hit 70% backhand volleys. And you know what I mean?
Yeah. No, people will watch us hit and have kids, teach, and we're having kids hit and hold their balance. And, one of our critics goes, that doesn't look like pro tennis. Well, the thing is we're teaching a fundamental, but then when they play, so they hit the one-handed backhand, and then instantly they're moving to the net. Yeah. So now they're turning, they're propelling themselves with their elbows. So now as they turn to run, it looks like they have this follow-through that goes down across their body.
And it's all about the moment of truth. So how are you going to get it so that at the moment of truth, the tennis racket is within those 20 degrees if you're on the baseline.
Yeah.
And if you're trying to pull across the ball, on the forehand side too, if you try to windshield wipe across, if you're trying to force those moves, it's like, good luck.
There's so many people that are recruiters, especially now, even in junior tennis. The third base coach, the guy handing out the business card at the tournament. But the umpire is going to say ready play and say, hey, come on around, come on back in 3 months. We'll show you how this kid's hitting the ball.
Yeah.
You don't judge the unfinished product.
Yeah.
Coming back to the list, so you get a cup of water. Dennis would have someone hold a cup of water and hit a forehand so this left arm's not flying.
Right.
Can you hit your forehand and hang onto that cup of water with your left hand?
Yep.
A key clip. Someone's hitting on the same side of the racket, and Dennis would just put the key clip and it just show you that, okay, the racket's always on the same side.
Yeah.
The key, it should change.
Yeah.
Using a pen,
Beresitegi.
Right. You hand someone a pen, and going back to Beresitegi, Alvaro Bentancur. Beresitegi trained at Saddlebrook, and I remember I heard Alvaro said, well, when a guy like that, he's on top, it's just licensed, people can hit the ball any way they want.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's like, I'm just going to have my own style. I'm just going to do my own thing. Yep. Doesn't work for everybody.
Yeah.
That would be a criticism of what we do, is that it doesn't allow for that unorthodox shot. You're going to meet a young Beresitegi
player.
Yeah, meet a young guy like that. He's 9 years old, and go, I think we should fix that. So you play little doubles and maybe play on. That's back in the day when there was bad grass, and not just be a clay court specialty. And also too, years ago, a hard court was, it was the grass and the carpet that was really fast. Now the surfaces play pretty much the same. But just to hand someone a pen, a pencil, a straw, and say, okay, how can you use this? And first of all, just with using it with, say, a grip. I mentioned the net. Putting your racket going across the net like this so you don't chop down on the net.
Unfortunately, the first thing that comes to my mind now when I think of a pencil is John Wick. That guy could take people out with a pencil. It's a great, great movie.
John Wick. The hat. Dennis would have a kid just, these kids just shift their head all day long.
Yeah.
Flyaway ball. Lenny Schloss, who is Billie Jean King eye coach.
Yeah.
Lenny's got great enthusiasm for the game and does so many things well. And people are they sneak a peek. The brain's ahead of the hand by a fifth of a second.
Yeah.
And Dennis was, they just, let me see you hit a serve, put your baseball cap on backwards, the old mushroom cap.
Yeah, we put a video on that the other day.
Oh, okay.
Everybody liked it.
How many different ways can you use the fence? Teaching the power line, using the ways to...
tracking motion.
Shape the swing.
Short backswings for volleys, forehands, backhands.
Just putting the kid with their... Matt Clore did a podcast for us, an interview. He says, Dad put him right up against the fence and feed balls at him. So you're not backing up.
Yeah, exactly.
Some people, if the balls come at really fast, they'd rather be on the other side of the fence. Dennis used to take a string. He would tie it to the racket. Mm-hmm. And then if someone had a big backswing, they would be pulling the net.
Yeah. Also, just to keep them from backing up when they're at the net, just to keep them up there. Same thing as like on the baseline.
You just take a penny or a dime and... you could tape it on the racket, but just put the dime on a certain bevel. And, if someone's trying to go from a forehand grip on the serve to a continental grip.
Under the knuckle or heel pad.
But again, it'd just be an exercise with creativity. That's the type of thing we did with this lab. Okay, let's make a list of 25 ways to change someone from palm up to palm down.
And that just creates more creativity too when you're in a group session like that.
The group dynamics, Dennis, Vic used to have people jog with little kid classes, and he'd teach this is the baseline. There's two of them. Let's run to the other baseline. Then yell it out.
Yeah.
So then they take the roller dummy. What's this? This is a single sideline.
Yeah, help them.
But Dennis, having kids pretend they're snow skiing or they're a human pogo stick, and all the different things you can do on the lines on the court.
Yeah.
Just jump over one line, or can you go 4.5 feet in the alley?
Yeah.
In his book, The Complete Book of Tennis, Yaroslav Hoba, I don't know I'm even close to pronouncing the name, a Czech.
Sounded perfect.
With, I know you can find this on internet. It's a photo. So Yaroslav is in South Africa, and in the book, Dennis says these are influential people in my life, and he mentions Verdict, he mentions Lair, he mentions Stanley Pleganov, he mentions Howard Brody, but Yaroslav Hoba was mentioned. So there's a photo. I'd like to find it, put it up on Facebook. It was 1955. It's a school setting, and so you just think, okay, Dennis Van der Meer. But he was doing a demo. He's teaching tennis, so he's in his 20s. But that's a great photo. I'd say with Dennis, if I had to say one thing, the work is done on the court. There's work is done on the court with
carpenter.
Yeah, I mean, you need architects, you need a plan, but you need somebody who's going to sweep up the sawdust, and you need somebody who's going to pound the nails, and that expression, don't get your hands dirty, put on the sunscreen, get the hat, and go to work. The International Hall of Fame, I think we could end on that. We could come back, and I want to, as I said, solidify more about Dennis Van der Meer, just more about Welby Van Horn. Certainly we could do that through short videos.
Yeah, we've done some.
I think it's bittersweet. Dennis, he should have been inducted in the Hall of Fame, same as Vic Braden.
Postmortem.
When he was alive.
Yeah.
So deserving, touched so many lives, really millions, because he taught teachers. The biblical
ripple effect
point of view is that, give a person a fish or teach them to fish.
Yeah.
I would guess that Dan Santorum would be speaking on Dennis's behalf, because
it'd be cool to get up there. I wonder.
Because the PTR, I know you were up there for Vic. I was running a fundraiser and couldn't go during when Braden was inducted. But I think Dan has been the CEO since 1980, so that's 41 years he's been there.
Time.
And I do think that the PTR family is certainly the legacy, the legend of Dennis Van der Meer doing great things. But I just think, people that look at what we do, and I know some of our critics will say, well, you need to blend in other methods. The GreatBase is just that. It's a blend of other methods.
Yeah, exactly.
And, we don't really, go through, okay, here's the success rate. This is what happens to players' tennis games. But
well, yeah,
the proof's in the pudding. So, but so much of what we do, thank you to Dennis Van der Meer.
Yeah. Also, I mean, you can lead the horse to the water, but you can't make him drink. So, they learn, but then you have to apply it. You have to practice. You have to do it.
Yeah, I think with tennis, though, why is there so much confusion? A basketball player is going to agree, this is the stance on the follow shot. My shoulders are going to be square. My elbow, my palm, we're going to breathe out, we're going to extend up, whatever, coming out of the starting blocks, things that we say all the time.
Yeah.
But in tennis, you can just make it up. And what happens is that people are competing against one another. And I think it's great to have new ideas. I like to think that, 5% of what we do is original, that we do have some of our own ideas, but at the same time, way too much self-promotion. And, I think that the historical side, one, you need to understand the history of tennis, the history of tennis teaching. But again, we have our ghost followers. There's so many people that I've trained to teach tennis they don't tell people that I trained them. They'll tell them that, even though Vic Braden didn't train them or Dennis Van der Meer, but it's just really teaching information transfer. The art is okay, the humanistic side, the relationship, but does it make sense?
Yeah.
Does it make sense?
I think we talk about it often with Vic, that you and I were fortunate enough to live the book. A lot of people, you can learn from Dennis's book, but fortunate that you were able to live the book with Dennis, and I'm sure he's smiling down. You're keeping a lot of the things going, as I'm sure others are as well. But
I think one thing, what to say? Oh, they're all on the same page. No, they're not even from the same book. Yeah. On the same page. Maybe, oh no, they're from the same sentence. Everyone's working together. And that's not true. The continuity from one court to the next, even at one facility. But I think it's also a matter of working the book and not go, well, and then people, they think they can add their own secret sauce to it because they really haven't done the work to really study someone. And I think that's where with say Jim Lehrer, we're going back and, he's written so many books and he's done so many things since the 80s, but this is how, as a clinician, you have, someone, and you're really both, are you an academic psychologist or a clinical psychologist? In the end, you have to, it's just like lecture lab.
Yeah.
You have education experience, but I think so many people, they don't have really education. That comes back to that article we have on the website where the consumer, do they have consumer knowledge?
Yeah.
We know they're highly intelligent unless they inherit it. As Vic used to say that, socioeconomic functioning skills. So people can afford a lesson. Then Vic would say, well, most pros, can they afford their own lesson? Yeah. And then, it just goes, then does the coach have product knowledge? And a lot of times the tennis teacher, do they have product knowledge? The answer is really no. Can they really produce? I'd say, and we've said it before in these podcasts, many people are running away. They're hiding from teaching beginners, and it hurts our game so badly. Dennis Van der Meer could teach, big numbers. Here they come. I'm going to teach. Imagine going to elementary school and say, "Yeah, come on out. We'll teach you all how to play tennis very quickly."
Yeah.
And then you have that skill set to do it.
Right.
So it's a combination education experience. But I think many people are sidestepping, bringing new people into the game, and let's do a better job with beginners. I don't want to digress too much. I don't know enough about it, but the UTR, I think there's so many positives, but that's another conversation. But this paid hits, I thought that was a mafia term. Paid hit.
I'm sure.
Is it really going to be a mom or a dad calling some 15-year-old kid who's a 10.5 and seeing if their kid who's a 7.5 they can hit and they're going to exchange fees?
Yeah.
I thought the whole thing about the UTR, and again, I don't know enough about it, was to make tennis less expensive.
Yeah, I don't either.
But I think we've asked Dave Fish, and he's had so much to do with the UTR. A lot of people that we need to talk to, but it's more to reinforce the message. It's not, granted, okay, we'll talk to this guy about this and that. I'd like to tell people we're in this lane. We're in the lane of teaching and coaching. I've been in that position where, okay, I'm training someone to be a camp manager or training somebody to, run a pro shop. And, but I just think our lane is to help people with teaching and coaching.
Yeah. Oh, well, thank you to Dennis Van der Meer and all those that are involved still in the PTR and keeping his message alive, yourself included, myself included. Thanks for listening, everybody. I think that concludes our discussion on Dennis, right?
Yeah, 44 podcasts. We're going to be close to 52. So now we just have Vic to cover of the eight pillars we have.
Yeah, that'll be coming up in the next few weeks. We'll probably go a few on that, at least a couple, 2, 3.
And then we're going to start having Andy Fitzell sing. All right, thanks, listeners. Appreciate it.
Yeah, appreciate it. Find us online, GreatBase Tennis, on social media. And greatbasetennis.com. We've got free courses out there. Give us a rating on Apple. We'd appreciate it. And until next time, thanks for listening.
Thanks again.